the museum and museum gallery here in Pacific Grove, one of our two galleries, um, focused on the artists connected in so many other ways. Those connected to Monterey County, um, either briefly or long term, from Robert Louis Stevenson through John Steinbeck with the authors and many others yeah, that were in the literary arts, but primarily the artists themselves, who had friendships with so many others of these, again, of the authors and connected to the area, the earlier cultures of the area, the development of the area. Um, so it's more of an educational venue and a free experience for all to enjoy.
It's unusual for a gallery owner to establish his or her, in your case, his and her museum and run it.
Right. It's I think it's important, very important actually, to express to younger generations what the earlier generations were capable of in their own creativity, um, in all the different mediums, whether it was textiles through the carpets, lighting through the fixtures, or the different time periods of history, the earlier cultures of this area as well. Um, the landscape at a certain point of development, the romance of the area, the history of the area, from the even before the Spanish, with the indigenous tribes. In the case that we have represented here, an original drawing from 1841 of one of the function tribes of a tribe of the Ohlone Indians that occupied the area, and then of course with the Spanish uh, coming in very early, and then the explorers, and then through the Mexican era, the Commodore Sloat raising the flag in 1846, and the American presence from then on. But so many others connected to the area. The Chinese fishing village from the early 1850s, having its presence here until 1906, with their own story that they brought here. And of course, the Japanese community, especially as pertains to Whalers Cove and Point Lobos and the abalone industry, and later in diving as well, and also in the Monterey Bay, um, the Sicilians, the Italians, and so many others. So Portuguese, um, and well, the natural beauty of the area drew so many to this particular region. And from the Monterey Bay, south of Santa Cruz, especially through the Monterey Bay, down through the Big Sur region, the wonderful climates for a little bit further inland of the Carmel Valley. And so fortunate that someone of international repute, um, many years prior to Steinbeck, was Robert Louis Stevenson's journey here in 1879, um, and spending approximately 4 months in Monterey, but also traversing up through and visiting through the Carmel Mission, Carmel Valley, reconnecting with Fanny Vandergrift Osborne. Eventually, would marry her up in San Francisco in 1880. But he saw the Hotel Del Monte being built, and he knew that this place would forever change once this major resort and hotel were built, and that's that's what was to happen, and no longer became the sleepy, quiet community that it used to be. We do have a section devoted to Arthur Matthews. We have quite a deal of quite a connection with Granville Redmond in particular. He was great friends with, and lifelong friends once they met, with Gottardo Piazzoni, who had established his studio up in San Francisco. Um, Both were members of the Bohemian Club, um, and but they had a lifelong friendship, and Piazzoni was so instrumental in helping to advance Redmond's career in many ways, especially through the galleries up in San Francisco later in Redmond's life. And they shared studios together when Redmond was had finished his studies at the California Institute, the Berkeley School in Berkeley, the school for the deaf, the dumb, and the blind, and so there was that journey first through his graduation in 1890, and then was accepted into the California School of Design, where Arthur Matthews was the director, long-term director there, and also was influenced by Raymond Yelland, who was an assistant director, and with Amadei Julin. So those were his primary instructors there. He completed many huge drawings and artwork, and also in sculpture, that while he was at the School of Design. And there was more than one of his large drawings that were made reference to in the local newspapers about this outstanding student who also happened to be deaf, and who did not speak either, but could express himself so eloquently through his drawings and the sculpture that he was working on, his life drawings from class. One of these brought a huge price that was purchased by a collector at the time, and so he began to establish himself as a person of note. Then it was through the principal who guided him through his time at the Berkeley School for the Deaf, just to abbreviate the longer title. And after completing studies at the School of Design to a point, they raised funds as a scholarship to send Redmond to Paris for studies, and that was in 1893, where he remained for almost 5 years, and had a painting exhibited at the Salon in Paris. Didn't win a medal, which is a great disappointment. Redmond stayed longer than he expected to, because he was out of funds, and begged for money from the principal, and was literally writing him constantly in need of more funds, which would be forthcoming up to a point. Redmond's parents had their own situation where they could not afford to fund him, raising the family and trying to make a living for themselves as well. And so that was a very difficult time in Redmond's life. I mean, it was wonderful in so many ways, and he became quite noted while he was in Paris as well, for his pantomime and gesture, his the way he could entertain people. He had an outgoing nature. He was extroverted in his personality. He was a sizable person, not really tall, but had a great shock of hair, and was very demonstrative through his expressions and posture, and the way they conveyed. With a single swoop of a hand, it could be a greeting or wonder or disgust. He could convey so much just through his personality, which was really larger than life. So Redmond, contracting scarlet fever, for which he recovered, but in his recovery, it was found that he was totally deaf by age 2.5. Chose not to speak. Well, his language really hadn't developed as he was deaf. But he could make laughing sounds. He could make sounds, and he could laugh, very boisterous in that sense. But his ability in learning sign through this California School of the Deaf and Dumb and Blind, and then he delved into. He was under the tutelage of Theophilus Hope de Estrella, who was a significant person in Redmond's life. I should back up a little. Redmond began sketching and drawing remarkably well, filling sketchbooks, and the parents saw his ability, and when they showed his sketches to others, they said, you needed to enroll him so he can get a proper education. He needs to become a full person as best he can be with his life. And but he's gifted. He's gifted at such age, and he was a child prodigy. in that sense. His heightened sense of expression found its way through drawing and eventually through expression through the written words and his letters that he would write. At the age of 11, his sister was 9 years old. That was for his playhouse, and it descended in the family. Um, and family have the letters the family wrote to cooperate it. And the painting was acquired directly from the family by Mildred Abronda, who I need to back up and give a great appreciation for her efforts with her unpublished manuscript of the life and legacy of Granville Redmond. She had been a mentor, a docent for the California School for the Deaf, which had relocated during her time in the prior to 1950s, even down in Fremont. And so she was very instrumental in also meeting further. She was so impressed by some of the artwork that was by Granville Redmond that was already there. She studied the life of Redmond and became and met family members who were alive. And her son Gene was alive. Redmond's first son Gene, who was born in 1900, was still alive. Interviewed him and others, including Mary Lee Redmond, his Redmond's daughter-in-law, who married Hiram, the youngest of the three children that Redmond and his wife Carrie had. Who I had met, she had already met Mary Lee, and so that was a wonderful relationship and important part of our experience with knowing Mildred and what she was able to accomplish with her insights directly from the family members. And then later, years later, let's see, while Mary Lee Redmond was still alive, but also while Mildred Abronda was, Harvey Jones had the first solo exhibition up at the Oakland Museum in 1989, and it was a major retrospective of Redmond's life, the first and a very wonderful effort on behalf of Harvey Jones. And then decades later, Scott Shields at the Crocker Museum mounted just a few years back now a major retrospective of Granville Redmond's life, with his own research adding into what Mary Lee Redmond had also discovered, but further beyond that, and then drawing from other collections and letters and sketches and wonderful paintings from many collectors and other institutions. Mounted a traveling exhibition that I believe went through 3 or 4 major museums, beginning at the Crocker Museum. So it's inspirational. I think that's very inspirational to the youth, and I credit Scott for having that insight to share to the younger generations and inspire them as well. The painting itself is remarkable, and I have many adults that come in and express wonder at this wonderful still life, very almost saison in its direction with the placement of the lemons, and the glaze on the teacup, the highlights, and the folds in the fabric on the table, the canted view slightly down. Such a wonderful rendering. It's signed Redmond, and so we're very fortunate to have acquired.
When he was 11, did he sign Seymour Redmond or Granville Redmond?
Actually, he didn't sign Granville Redmond until he opened his first studio in Los Angeles in 1904. And it was the first time he signed Granville Redmond. And he sent a letter to the principal he had stayed very closely in touch with over the years of the, and I want to say Mr. Warrington, Professor Warrington, I digress, I can't remember his exact name right now, but he was very formative again along with Theophilus Hope. Yes, tell him.
Was it Wilkinson?
Pardon?
Was his name Wilkinson?
Maybe it was Warrington. It was very close. It was close. Wilkinson could be. I'd have to check. Yep. Okay. So
one of his friendships was also with Tilden.
Yes.
And when he arrived in Paris, Tilden was already there, and I don't think he was as extravertic as
that's right.
Redmond.
Right.
A little bit.
Right.
He wrote that.
Yes.
Redmond came and life came back to Paris. Paris.
Yes, he'd met Tilden who was also a deaf, but a major sculptor in his time. They were lifelong friends upon meeting at the Berkeley Institution for the Deaf and School for the Deaf. And right when Redmond arrived towards the end of 1893, it was Tilden who met him at the station, and they shared studios together for a while. And
he was teaching him French.
Mm-hmm. It was great, great segue, great introduction for Redmond to begin to understand some of the French language through writing and through signing. Yes, and which was important also because Redmond's goal was to not only study there at the Académie Julian, but to express, to hopefully enter in which he eventually did, 1895, have one of his major paintings exhibited at the salon.
Académie Julian in Paris, it still exists, but it seems like almost everybody from California, or the California period, they go there and study there. That was very influential.
Right. Yes, it was. You weren't required to actually understand French to attend. I think that was one of the also the level of I believe of the studies was slightly different at the from the Académie Julian through the École des Beaux-Arts. Really to be to have your European tour, so to speak, but with the springboard being studies at the in Paris at either of the two major French schools of art, and then to experience life through the artist's eyes and the writers and the sculptors, and then maybe to journey on to say Giverny if one was inclined towards Impressionism, and but also maybe further down into Italy and such for other travels. Redmond himself, when he was over there, traveled outside of Paris to the countryside, and I lived out in one of the cottages for a while. He tried to explore a little bit more of the surrounds as well. So he was absorbing like a sponge, and he was not being deaf. He was very much in his own world most of the time. I will say when he exhibited at the Salon in Paris, he was one of 14 other deaf artists that were exhibiting or had exhibited at the Salon. So that was quite a I think it makes a statement for the Salon, and they were interested in the artistic expression, and there was not a taint on a person, because in many decades earlier there was a feeling of maybe a person wasn't they had there was a taint on their character, that they really weren't up to being what other people should be or could be, and I think that was really a way of helping lift past that in a cultural and humanistic sense. So I could go a bit further into the meeting Mary Lee Redmond and how important that was, and Mildred Branda a bit further. And we could back up to Redmond's ability to, again, being an outgoing personality from his earliest days. When he graduated even before he graduated, he was the captain of the baseball team, okay, at the Berkeley School for the Deaf. And during the commencement at graduation in 1890, and I'll read this, Scott Shields brought this to light in his further research. On June 10th, 1890, Redmond graduated from the California Institute of Education for the Deaf, Dumb, and Blind. He even performed at the commencement exercises, interpretively signing conditions of the heart and mind, love, anger, hunger, hatred, and ignorance before enthusiastic attendees. So committed to his continued development, the board of directors once again agreed to use the Durham Funds, which was a scholarship and endowment to this institution, to enable Redmond to attend the Callis School for Design, and while doing so, maintain his residency in Berkeley, acknowledging his great promise as an artist and that he was poor and not able to pay his way at the time. So this really transformed Redmond's life through graduating, through his studies there, again, as we mentioned earlier, with Matthews and the other instructors. Well, I need to digress back a bit further to where he, as a member of the Bohemian Club in 1912, he was in 2 films, had parts in 2 films that were shown at the Bohemian Grove and at the Bohemian Club itself. And he also had a role of obviously a non-speaking role, but with his gestures and posture and attitude in The Fall of Ugg, which was a major performance. So again, his acting, his outgoingness, and his bringing something on stage was remarkable for someone who stepped outside of himself due to his wonderful, the way he could channel what was for many considered an affliction, but he turned it into such a positive. And so again, a testament to his larger than life personality and his wonderful connection with other people in different walks of life. So it could have been their suggestion also that it was possibly through a member of the Bohemian Club that also would have known Chaplin very easily. So these were major figures in all walks of life. And of course, Chaplin began his first filming up in the East Bay area before even going down to Hollywood. Some say there was through an introduction through Piazzoni, Toto Piazzoni. Others say it, and one of the art critics for the LA Times thought he may have taken a little bit of credit for making that introduction by expressing this wonderful deaf person with his ability to communicate through his paintings. There's another situation where it was said that Redmond was first met Charlie Chaplin when Chaplin was out in the countryside, and here was this man painting a canvas of the countryside, communing with nature, expressing himself. Shocked that this man who saw this beautiful painting, which he ended up buying, was rendered this beautiful painting in silence and was deaf. He handed him his card. So there was that particular incident as well. So it's not really known exactly how they met, but it's been in a number of ways. But that was a recorded situation that happened as well, and was relayed, I believe, through a member of Redmond's family, or Redmond himself made a note of that. He was so taken with Redmond, again, his ability to express himself in the silent world. He saw the advantages to helping express to the audience a true understanding of a man who actually lived in the silent world, and gave him roles in at least 7 of his movies, silent movies, and others, including Raymond Griffith, as well as Douglas Fairbanks, used them in movies as well, used Redmond for roles in their movies during this time period. So they had such an affection for each other, right? Redmond was, let's back up, Charlie Chaplin invited Redmond to come down and gave him a studio within the Chaplin studios. And in fact, there's letters here where Redmond is addressing the Town and Country Review, a magazine published in London, England, and it was addressed to Mr. Granville Redmond at the Chaplin Studios. So he had his own address for a while there. And this is also a place where Chaplin could come and rest in quietude and decompress from the filming of the day, the demands upon him, to spend time watching Redmond paint And
You have there's one picture, I think, of Redmond in his studio and
mhm,
he's painting,
yes,
and you have this painting.
I have the painting just on the wall here. It's the um, our title is the Carmel Coast with Cyprus, or Cyprus on the Carmel Coast. It's a specific location at the bottom of Ocean Avenue in Carmel, just a short distance traveling north towards Pebble Beach. You have a ravine that still is there, and cypress trees that are still there as well, with a few less limbs possibly. But again, he completed the painting. Uh, According to the family, was completed in Redmond's in the Chaplin Studios in the loft where he had been given he had been given by Chaplin. So, and Chaplin benefited also by and would, even with scenes without Redmond, he learned as best he could to sign and express himself through sign language, and would use his hands using symbols that the deaf could understand, but also were in such a way rendered by the deaf that they could be obvious to the hearing audience as well. And so that in itself engaged any deaf person. It was inspiring to those who were deaf, maybe watching the silent films, as well as expressing again through sign language that Chaplin would just automatically picked up from Redmond, and so it was a win-win for both friends. Remained friends. They were friends for 18 years, and in fact, when Redmond had serious health problems as time went on, and it was Charlie Chaplin that would visit him often at the hospital at his bedside. Um, when he passed away, when Redmond passed away in 1935, uh, it was Charlie Chaplin that sent a pallet full of flowers, a bouquet of flowers in the shape of a pallet, uh, and with in friendship of his in admiration of Redmond.
So was Redmond depressed in his life? There were
Redmond became, yes, he did. He struggled greatly with uh, when he was in Europe. He was in a foreign country with a foreign language, and while he tried his best, he was always short of funds, and would write constantly back for more funds from this endowment, from the Durham funds from the School of the Deaf, and the principal was in charge of making those decisions and bringing it to the board. This happened constantly over a time period. Redmond did have a painting that was accepted into the salon, but didn't win a medal. So he kept trying. He always wanted to actually have acknowledgement as having received a medal at the salon for one of his entries. But that was not to be, and Redmond did not want to come home without being a success. He actually thought of, and he expressed this later, a thought about taking his life, and he didn't express that until he did in a candid letter to again to this to his mentor, the principal at the School for the Deaf. They were very he was very important to Redmond, and when he wrote to him, and he opened his studio it was 1904 going into 1905 down in Los Angeles, Redmond Inn, signed for the first time. It was always Seymour Redmond, okay, Seymour Granville Redmond. And first time he found himself with his own studio and was so excited to begin his career in finding himself. He identified himself for the first time as Granville Redmond, and expressed that he felt so fortunate that and he expressed to this gentleman through his letter that he had considered taking his life, but by God's will he didn't, and he had more to give to the world through his creative energies, which ended up being both through his wonderful paintings, as well as his expression through the silent films as well, and his inspiration to those in the deaf world to have a future in life, and to have hope, and how fortunate that was.
was he depressed?
Well, what happened was, yes, he preferred obviously paintings of, let's say, silence and solitude. let's say, they were paintings of tranquility, serenity in that direction. He could have the serenity was found within his paintings of the Golden Hills with poppies. They sold. They were the bread and butter. They brought the income in. He needed to make a living. But he preferred the twilight scenes, the nocturnal scenes. He was a master at tonalism. And what was so rare about him as well was that he had this amazing ability to be both a tonalist and also an impressionist with a full palette of colors. And he could paint and did paint it both in in Southern California with his first studio, as well as Central California, as well as Northern California. So he was statewide and is to this day considered and became very famous in his time, both as an actor and as an artist. But to this day, he is considered one of the top, at least in the top 5 of the major impressionist artists that California has produced, who was nationally and internationally famous in his day. So Redmond had his own bouts with depression and persevered and was so fortunate he was able to make a difference with his life in so many ways later. As years went by, one of his sisters uh, became very depressed and was having challenges in her life. And Redmond wrote her a 14-page letter, of which I have the second page is unfortunately missing, but I have the other handwritten letter by Granville Redmond to his dear sister. And I'd like to read a little bit of what he had to say to get an idea of the compassion of this man that he had for others, not only that she was his sister, but the way he could express himself through the written word and the intellect that he also possessed. Now, this was May 16th on a Wednesday. My dear sister, like a thunderstorm, I have been imprisoned in bed with my fractured ankle for over 10 days now. However, my spirit is excellent. I forget the pain of the past. I have been and am writing about C. Chaplin's work and other compositions about art with my peaceful pipe, as Mark Twain's habit, writing in bed. Imagine a cloud of tobacco smoke like a veiled mist circling about me. Helen came in just now, that was one of Redmond's daughters, and madly opened all the windows, hating the pipe odor which brought to my mind Mark Twain. Now, the third page, since I don't have the second, it begins, means nothing. Your face is good. Your heart is good. He's encouraging his sister here. Your life is growing better and better. Can't you see it yourself? Certainly all of us are growing older, but our hearts and thoughts are mellowing with life. If our minds and bodies are clean, we will then be gloriously young in our hearts. You see how beautiful a spirit Tennyson had. He wrote Crossing the Bar at 80, Goethe, Faust at 82. Psychologists, too, say the greatest bewilderment is among men of 50 who have found they must start life all over. Many men proved their best work after 50. John Quincy Adams did not show his form until 65. And he goes on with many other important people in history and their challenges and how they rose above later in life. And then and I'll skip past to the last a couple of pages. My hope is that Jean was Redmond and Carrie, his wife Carrie's firstborn, was born in 1900. Jean will build us a small house, including a large studio somewhere near the rolling hills, so that I will feel free from the distracting vibrations of the movie world. With this, I might add that people were mistaken to say that I was really a sick man. I needed a complete rest, body and mind, which we all need at times to be reborn in spirit. But there are some who can skillfully keep eternally fit from the tainted world. If, however, I were weak, perplexed with fear and with fear and evils, I would have gone to the grave long ago. Life is but a thought, and a quiet minds cannot be perplexed or frightened, but go on, infortunate or misfortunate, at their own private pace, like a clock during a thunderstorm. With love, your brother Granville. How compassionate and how eloquent. I began becoming interested in early California art and history, context of the times, in the mid 70s. And by 1980, my wife and I opened up our Trotter galleries devoted to early California artists. And within the first 2 or 3 years, we became aware of Redmond immediately. But it was, and it acquired some works by Granville Redmond, and we were struck by the uniqueness of Redmond's work and learning more about him, the paint application, the quality of his sunsets, especially in tonalist paintings, expressing quietude, and then his daytime scenes of landscape, and later with his wildflower paintings as well. And I was exhibiting at an art and antique show up in the Bay Area in 1986, and I happened to have a couple of works by Granville Redmond. And a lady came into the booth and said that she knew the daughter-in-law of Granville Redmond, who was living up in the gold country at the time, and in Colombia. And she is related to Redmond. I said, she is, and yes, and she says, I know that would she. I'm sure she would love to have you over for a visit. And I said, well, I would love to meet her, and so I her name was Mary Lee Redmond. I gave her a call, and she invited me to visit with her. And as I was a dealer and collector, or my wife and I were, she said there would be possibly some items available that might be interested in. And so I made the trip. It was actually in, early part of 1987, and met this wonderful lady, Mary Lee Redmond, who was the wife of Hiram Redmond, the youngest of Granville Redmond's 3 children. And she had inherited wonderful items, his sketches, pencil sketches, letters, photographs. She had so much that she asked if I would like to look around and see other examples. There were oil sketches, oil studies. There were wonderfully finished paintings. And I was just amazed at what I was seeing. My exposure was reasonable, but not into this depth. And to have this opportunity, she also had a silver medal that Redmond had been awarded in 1909 at the Alaska Yukon Exposition for the Restful Song of the Deep. And that was available as well as a candelabra that graced her father-in-law's dining room table that I have here still, and was willing to part with that as well. I'll go back to the medal that I acquired from her. Years later, through Mildred Abronda, we made contact with a descendant of Governor Marion Hayes of Washington State, who had acquired the painting and were able to acquire the Restful Song of the Deep and the painting that was awarded the medal for. And the silver medal, and we so united the two, and owned those for many years. Um, but it was through talking with her and getting a sense of Redmond as a person in his time, and she was so taken with him and the family, and had that. It was just, it's a rare thing. We have found this to be the case in some other wonderful artists that we have uh, been privileged to know and acquire items from directly, the sons or daughters or the granddaughters and such, and over the years. And so this was a unique opportunity very early in our career, so to speak. And in '87 is when I made the acquisitions, and still have a number of Granville Redmond's handwritten letters, like as the one that he wrote to his sister Helen. So inspirational, getting an idea of the complexity of this amazing person, and then being able to contribute with Harvey Jones to his exhibition of Granville Redmond at the Oakland Museum in '89, and as well as Mildred Bronte and so many others, and then eventually with Scott Shields as well at the Crocker Museum. And so memorable in so many ways, and there's a somewhat of a circumstantial gift that maybe comes one's way. Yeah, the legacy during his lifetime is also with Douglas Tilton, the famous sculptor, whose famous sculpture, one of his most famous, is the baseball player, a larger than life statue, and they were always very aware of their role, known on a national basis or international, to the deaf community, as being inspirations for those who were maybe uh, born with maybe an affliction, but turned it into an attribute, and that continues to this day, and will, as an inspiration for so many, and also for a way of those in the hearing world to have respect and give that uh, mm, uh, that is which is due to others in this world.
So when you mentioned even in this letter that he wanted to have studio in the hills of California, and that was his dream. What was his relationship with paintings in solitude with higher being? He was very.
Yes, yeah, as his good friend Gertrude Piazzoni expressed, my God is nature. And I truly feel that Redmond found solace both spiritually through God's creations, and through nature, but also in humanity as well, and the goodness in people. And he had, especially through maybe the expression in silent films, he was seeing some of what Chaplin was expressing as well, uh, to an international audience with Chaplin's silent films, of which Redmond was privileged to be a part of as well, and the world was privileged to have Redmond as well in some of his films in wonderful roles.
Do you have some of his sketches for the circus?
Yes, right. The circus. I was fortunate to make acquisition of 2 charcoal drawings that Redmond completed, and they're just on the wall over here, and I'd be happy to pull them off if you'd like to see them or show you. So I have 2 charcoal drawings that we acquired, both done on consecutive days. This one is the first, signed G. Redmond, June 27th, 1927. And this is a depiction from the set of The Circus, which was released in 1928. It shows the horses with original harnesses and the circus wagons in the background. And I actually watched the movie on YouTube and confirmed everything is accurate, even to the harnesses on the horses. Um, and uh, and then the second, again, this is the time when Redmond had his studio there, so he was constantly doing his sketches of the sets as well. And fortunately, they were able to acquire these two. So this was the next day on June 28th, 1927, with a notation for C. Chaplin. And so here you see figures on the set next to one of the circus wagons, horses grazing on some hay, and then you have the two poles that supported the big top that was obviously in the movie, and with the large ropes holding them in place. So it's obviously didn't go to Mr. Chaplin. Redmond had kept it. Maybe he gave Mr. Chaplin others that he had as a remembrance. So while Redmond did not have a role in the actual movie, and while looking at the movie, watching the movie, I noticed just for a split second a couple of frames where Granville Redmond is just stepping outside of his studio right here, and I was able to separate that out, that particular frame, and see Mr. Redmond on the lot. So he actually got into the movie, The Circus, but just as an incidental situation. So, yeah. So we were very fortunate when meeting Mary Lee Redmond to acquire photographs of Granville Redmond, and a number of the photographs that we acquired were actually Granville Redmond painting a major painting of his. Fortunately, it was our area here, it was Carmel Beach, and the title, our title, is more of a generic title, is Carmel Coast, Carmel Sand Dunes with Cypress, and a large 30 by 40 painting. And this happens to be the only painting that Redmond is depicted and has been photographed in many different poses in front of this painting. It's only, let's say, promotional shot photographs taken of him in his time of a specific painting, rendering a specific painting. And this painting was, we had the smaller version rendered on location that was sold. We sold into another private collection of early California art. Much smaller, 20 by 26 inches, beautifully rendered. And this is the studio completed in the studio in the Chaplin Studios in 1917. It was right on the cusp of Redmond actually working with Chaplin, but he had already been given a studio, so the assumption is this was rendered in the Chaplin Studios. So you have Carmel Beach rendered just walking north several yards north to a ravine showing the cypress and vegetation on the dunes, a view out to the ocean. Very much, it's actually it's impressionist brushwork, broken brushwork, divided brushwork, but actually has a tonal quality as well. So it is not different from his brightly colored wildflower paintings of the poppies and lupin and such, of which he became also very famous for. As I may have mentioned earlier, that his preference were the moonlit scenes, primarily sunset and moonlit scenes of quietude and reverie. And so this combines a bit of both impressionist brushwork within a rather muted palette, keyed in beautifully without the exaggeration of brighter colors necessarily. This is the only actually specifically identifiable scene that he did in Monterey. Then we have on the walls, on the top, this painting is a view of Lake Cachuma, south of Solvang, northeast of Santa Barbara, obviously in springtime, with the poppies and lupin. This was it's an outstanding example of Redmond's wildflower paintings, the scenes of the Golden Hills, the gold being on top of the hills rather than underneath them, and but it has a joyous quality where Redmond really could as he did with his artwork, he could express himself so eloquently without words, but spoke volumes with his work as well at the same time. And you have almost it's what I like to term a realistic interpretation of Impressionism. So pointillist work, somewhat in paint application, the distant views, the mid distance rendered beautifully with Lake Kachuma, and then the foothills graduated beyond with the wonderful clouds in the sky, kind of fleeting clouds. But this is where he could really make a living and put food on the table, so to speak. And yet his toneless paintings, of which I don't have one currently available to show you, but many are illustrated in the wonderful books that have been written on Redmond through the Harvey Jones Oakland Museum book. This is a painting of Long Beach through moonlight. We actually used to own this painting, and then of course Scott Shields as well. And the Restful Song of the Deep was another beautiful toneless painting rendered in 1907 that won him the medal at the Alaska Yukon exposition that we used to own as well. Down below is this formative painting showing the genius of this gifted prodigy, and where he rendered the lemons with teacup at age 11 for his sister's playhouse, and how fortunate that it was acquired directly from the family with letters provided for documentation by Mildred of Bronda, and acquired again from Mildred's collection after she passed away. With Redmond. So he was, again, a lifelong friend and a wonderful mentor as well, and friend to Redmond and his family. So you have, I think, Randall Redmond looks like his fist is pounding on the table, and I think we see Gottardo Piazzoni admonishing him with a fork, maybe the empty bottle is enough and we don't need another. Let's put it that way. So, and this was rendered by actually Maynard Dixon, and in early work, and I believe that was 1904. Another pencil drawing we acquired was a profile sketch of Granville Redmond when they had taken the stagecoach up to the Tasajara hot springs in the Los Padres forest, with the notation penned by Piazzoni, sketched by Gottardo G.P. Piazzoni on top of a mountain 5,500 feet above sea level and pinned to a big pine tree. The names of the stage passengers who came with the artist well affixed to the sketch. This was done while the horses were resting from their hard drive from the Tasajara hot springs in Monterey County. So a wonderful profile from a lifelong friend of Redmond's.